All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into a really provocative idea from a recent essay, the idea that the United States should just be, well, dismantled. We're going to walk through the author's argument piece by piece to see exactly how they get to such a, frankly, explosive conclusion. Okay, so the author really doesn't beat around the bush. This one line, this is it. This is the whole argument in a nutshell. It's a straight-up call to break the country apart into smaller, more focused regional nations. So, how in the world do you get to that point? Well, the author lays out a roadmap. Their argument comes in 5 main parts. It kicks off with a whole new take on America's founding, then it walks us through a crisis of resources, a crisis of social trust, and, well, it all leads to that final dramatic call to balkanize. First up, we've got to look at the history, or at least the author's version of it. They kick things off by framing America's founding not as a glorious beginning, but as a fundamental problem. A problem that they think explains everything that's happening right now. Okay, but wait. Before we dive any deeper, we absolutely have to be clear on this one word: Balkanization. It's the key to this whole thing. It just means a big state or region breaking up into smaller, separate pieces. You got to keep that definition in your head because that's the destination this entire argument is driving toward. So the whole argument really starts with this complete reframing of American history. The essay basically says, forget what you learned in school. America, according to this author, wasn't born as a unified nation. Nope, it was a business venture. A colonial project set up for one reason and one reason only: to exploit a continent for everything it was worth. And this is where it gets really interesting, right? The author paints this picture of 2 completely different worlds. On one side, you've got the New World model, which is basically capitalism in its infancy. It's all about grabbing land and resources with just enough rules to keep business moving. And on the other side, you have the Old World model back in Europe, which was all tangled up in tradition, kings, nobles, the church, a totally different way of doing things. Okay, so let's follow that logic. If the whole country was built like an extraction project, what happens when you start to run out of stuff to extract? And that's exactly where the author takes us next. This is part 2 of the argument, the crisis of resources. It's the point where, according to the essay, this whole colonial model just breaks. And you can see the long-term thinking here. The author draws this incredible line through history. They start with the Portuguese colonial model from the 1400s, jump all the way to a legal fight over a tiny fish in Nevada in the 1970s, and then connect that to the water shortages we see today from things like massive farms and data centers. The whole point is to show this isn't a new problem. It's a centuries-old pattern of exploitation finally coming home to roost. So according to the author, this resource problem puts a huge amount of stress on society. And that pressure, they say, leads right into the third piece of their argument, the arrival of the surveillance state. It's this idea that you need a new kind of control to manage a culture that's starting to fall apart. Yeah, this is really the core of it. The author's claim is that the basic social glue, what they call a high-trust society, is just dissolving. People don't have that shared cultural foundation anymore. And when that's gone, what's left? Well, according to this essay, the government has no choice but to step in with heavy-handed policing and surveillance just to keep the whole thing from flying apart. So what caused this breakdown in trust? Well, the essay points the finger at these 4 big economic shifts. Things like mass immigration to fill jobs, pushing down wages to boost the stock market, sending manufacturing overseas, and using new labor to weaken unions. The argument is that all of these decisions, made for economic reasons, had this massive unintended side effect. They shredded the cultural fabric of the country. And to describe this cultural shift, the author uses some very specific and pretty inflammatory language. They literally describe it as replacing that high-trust society with, and this is a direct quote, subcontinental Asian chaos and Aztec brutality. It's clearly meant to be a provocative and powerful image. And this is where the tech comes in. The argument goes that this instability at home creates a demand for a new kind of control. So you get companies like Palantir taking surveillance technology that was originally designed for war zones overseas and turning it inward, using it on the domestic population to manage the chaos. So now the argument shifts gears a little bit and gets a lot more philosophical. Because to really make the case for breaking up the country, the author first has to argue that America, as it exists today, isn't even a real nation. They say it's just an economic zone. So what's the alternative? Well, it's based on this idea called communitarianism. It's a philosophy that says real political power shouldn't come from some distant capital, but from the community itself, the people you actually live with, you know? They should be the ones making the rules. This table really spells it all out, doesn't it? It's the author's big comparison. On one side, you have America today, an economic zone that's held together by money and government force. On the other side, you have their ideal of a real nation, something built on shared culture, shared history, and real organic bonds between people. And this really brings the whole critique together. The final conclusion of this part of the essay is that America isn't a collection of communities. It's an economic machine where a militarized police force basically makes sure everyone stays integrated, all in the service of consumerism. From this point of view, the whole system feels forced and fake. And all of this, the history, the resource crisis, the surveillance state, it's all been building up to this, the final chapter. The author has laid out the problem, and now here comes their solution. And they frame it as a very stark choice. There's no gray area here. Option 1, you accept the world of mass surveillance and you fall in line. Or, option 2, you shake off the yoke of this government and form new nations. It's presented as an all-or-nothing decision. And with this line, the whole thing becomes deeply personal. It's not just a political theory anymore. It's a statement of identity, a rejection of the label American in favor of something more local, more specific, more rooted, Appalachian. This is really the heart of what Balkanization means to the author. Now, this part is really key to how the author justifies such a radical idea. They're very clear that this call to break away isn't supposed to be an act of hate or aggression. Instead, they frame it as an act of love, a way to protect their own people, their own culture, and their children's future. And there you have it. That's our walkthrough of the argument for American Balkanization. And it leaves us with a pretty profound question, one that comes directly from the author's own logic. When does an act like this stop being seen as hate and start being seen as love? At what point does a community look around and decide to forge a completely new identity?